Hey guys, how's it going? Delrith here, bringing you another rapid fire style review, this time for State of Decay 2, developed by Undead Labs and published by Microsoft. Let me get started by saying that I was a huge fan of the original State of Decay when it came out so many years ago, and I ended up playing it to death. I even bought it a second time when it was re-released on PC. This isn't to say that the first game didn't have any problems or was perfect in any fashion, and oh my god, did it have a lot of problems. But I enjoyed it for what it was, as it was an original concept, and I was definitely excited to hop into State of Decay 2 and see what had changed. For those of you that aren't familiar with the State of Decay series, it's a somewhat open-world zombie survival game where you manage a group of survivors and try to make it through a post-apocalyptic scenario. State of Decay 2 was pretty much a copy-paste of that concept and did very little to change its core gameplay features. You start the game picking between a few groups of survivors, going through a rather small tutorial, and then selecting between one of 3 maps to start your survival on. I personally chose the plateau as there were no descriptions of the maps and set out on my journey. Now, I will say the game has improved graphically. This was one of the first things I noticed when I got into playing. Everything was higher detailed, the world had more going for it, and zombies were a lot more grotesque looking. Houses had a lot more clutter and objects thrown around in them. They also had better ambience and lighting, and all of this tied into a pretty good looking post-apocalyptic scenario. The original State of Decay had some janky looking texturing and model work, but Undead Labs definitely went the mile to clean up this game and make everything look a lot more presentable. On a side note though, I have to say that there's a few issues with animations, and it's probably something they'll fix though, probably. I have to give huge props too to Jasper Kidd for working on the soundtrack for this game. It was extremely well done and I loved his work for a very long time now. The menu theme of State of Decay 2 is fantastic, and I could listen to it for hours on loop. Those are really the only 2 major improvements of the game that I found throughout my playthrough. Sure, there are some decent quality of life changes in the game, such as being able to upgrade cars and weapons more, assigning leaders, which give you global bonuses and change the randomly generated missions that spawn, but the core of the game didn't change much from the original. In fact, there were multiple times during my playthrough that people asked why I was playing the original State of Decay. I even found myself constantly thinking that I was playing the exact same game. Combat, although more fluid, plays almost identically to the previous State of Decay. You can either run around and swing wildly with melee weapons, or go the ranged weapon route and simply headshot everything you come across. The game generally felt like a breeze as well if you use firearms, as at the end of my first playthrough I had literal thousands of bullets and never once ran out of ammo. I also killed pretty much everything in my path and made sure to max out all of my survivors. I'm not saying the combat is awful by any means, but it's really nothing special and feels incredibly average throughout the game. As I mentioned, survivors will level up in State of Decay 2, and once at a max skill, you can specialize them to do certain things better. If you focus on guns, you'll get the ability to unjam and repair in the field, which is pretty much making them never run out of durability. And if you focus on melee, you have a chance to specialize as something like a Blade Master, doing a lot more dismemberment and instant killing things with bladed weapons. Crafters can specialize at being better at certain activities like making gun mods, but there's really nothing beyond that as far as a skill tree goes. Base management is still tedious. Survivors will fight with each other, certain upgrades don't seem to do anything major, like guard towers, which don't do anything, and you're going to be constantly bleeding resources with upkeeps and little accidents where you just lose stuff because why not, constantly forcing you to always be going out and grabbing resources with little time to actually explore and enjoy the environment. They could have streamlined a few things like having all your resources in the car automatically get dropped into your base when you park, but instead you have to get out and manually transfer all the things through your inventory into the vehicle, then into the base. It's just annoying. It's little annoyances like that were everywhere throughout. Couple this with the same max resource limitations, and don't get me wrong, there are upgrades but not enough for some types, and it simply becomes frustrating to constantly deal with. Resourcing and getting gear feels almost exactly the same as the first game. You'll go into a town, use a tower to identify which buildings are which, and then go in and loot shelves and whatnot to get equipment and run it back to your base. This is the entire game, and there's very little deviation in that playstyle. There's never really an end goal in the game other than getting to the biggest survival base and draining a map completely of resources, which is something that still happens. Keep in mind, there's a way to reset it, but it's kind of a chore and involves moving on to another map. Traders will show up every now and then, but there are only a few that are honestly worth trading with. Unless you get a trader leader, it's more of a chore to go out into the field than it is to simply just hoard everything. I will say there are definitely some meat weapons in the game like the Chris Vector, but you really don't see them very often. Oh yeah, there's also a ton of random physics issues and bugs in the game that will most likely get patched out in the future, but definitely be prepared to have your car flip up into the air, spin 1,000 times, hit the ground, and explode. Honestly though, I gotta say, one of the most disappointing things to me was the lack of a tangible campaign. It was one of the most requested things in State of Decay 2, and it seriously falls flat on its face. You get a fairly decent tutorial and starting mission involving this new blood plague, but the campaign is almost of non-existence afterwards. You get a set of randomly spawned survivor camps that you have to deal with, and a preset number of blood plague hives on the map that you need to kill. There's one or two other quirky things thrown in aside from that, but that's pretty much the entire experience. I also have to mention that this game added multiplayer co-op. I was extremely excited to play this game with friends and enjoy this looter shooter. However, I was incapable of playing this as I personally had an issue with the Xbox Live connectivity. Yes, it uses Xbox Live on Windows 10. This bug has persisted since 2016 and still doesn't have a resolution, and basically I'm just blocked from connecting to the Xbox Live servers and tried dozens of fixes, but wasn't able to resolve it. For the record, I'm just one of what I saw was thousands experiencing this problem across multiple games without a fix from Microsoft. From what I hear and I've seen, though, from other sources, the co-op can be extremely buggy and laggy, resulting in massive desync problems and generally being an unpleasant experience. If I had the option to play the game cooperatively, I would have, as it definitely seems like a lot of the experience in looting is balanced around playing with friends, resulting in a worse single-player experience. If it improves in the future, it will definitely be a plus, as playing any game with friends makes it more enjoyable. I guess the best way to summarize my feelings about this game is that I was simply disappointed. Every single system is simply average or slightly above average, and genuinely feels like they didn't try to innovate or truly realize what their game and universe was capable of. I was expecting a full campaign, maybe a construction system, maybe a create your own survivor system, which there isn't, and maybe having more of an impact on the world. At the end of the day, I felt like I was playing more of a State of Decay 1.5 and not a State of Decay 2, and that really let me down. Don't get me wrong, this game is a definite improvement in some areas over its predecessor, but again, it fails to innovate in any major fashion. Because of all these reasons and my experience with State of Decay 2, I gotta give the game a 6 out of 10. It's a slightly above average game. There are many things that could have been done better in my opinion, and I hope in the future that the DLCs and patches further hammer out the game. Anyway guys, that's gonna be it for this rapid fire review. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye! Oh my god, fucking so. Now she's stuck in my car, damaging it.